Hey there, you're watching. Reader Recap. The story starts with the little girl who walks to meet her father late in the evening. She does not know why her father called her so unexpectedly, but assumes it has to do with her birthday, which is tomorrow. However, upon entering the room, the child immediately senses the strange mood of a stranger. The father's servant grabs the girl's hand while the man speaks of a sacrifice, in which the girl will be the victim. Thus, on the night before her birthday, the closest person to the little girl, her father, betrays and abandons her. 6 years later, this girl, now grown up, finds herself in a dangerous situation on the street. Bandits surround her and the maid who is with her. Rena Rubel, the protagonist, is very scared and cannot protect herself. While the villains prepare to capture and sell both girls for a large sum, all Rena and her maid can do is cower in a corner and beg not to be harmed. Rena also tries to use her status as the Marquise's daughter, but the bandits do not believe her. They would not have been saved if a man in a cloak with a masked face had not come to their aid. The stranger turned out to be much stronger than the bandits and easily defeated them one by one. The girls did not immediately trust the stranger, thinking he too intended to sell them. However, the man revealed his face and reassured the frightened girls, offering to escort them home. Eventually, they found themselves lodging with a stranger. The young man was surprised at how easily Rena and her servant followed the first person they met. It was dangerous to be so carefree in the capital. The protagonist was not too concerned, enjoying the delicious food that the young man had offered them. Besides, she knew his name was Lignan, so it could be considered that they were acquainted. However, Lignan was worried about Rena's safety and gave her a dagger for self-defense. The girl thought the young man was charming, but Lignan assumed that she was foolish because of her demeanor. Later that night, Lignan entered the room where the young woman was sleeping and woke her up, forcing her to get out of bed. Within minutes, one of the bandits who had attacked the protagonist burst into the room. 2 other men were with him, demanding that they hand over the girl. After they refused, the bandits summoned a monster, which surprised Lignan greatly. He fought the huge creature while Rena stood before him, naively demanding that they stop. The young man pushed the protagonist aside, but the monster had already spotted her and decided to attack. To everyone's surprise, Rena easily killed the monster with the dagger that Lignan had given her. For a few seconds, everything around froze, but then the gang leader did not lose his composure and began to transform into a monster with the help of a stone he used to summon the creature. His eyes turned black with red pupils, and fangs grew from his teeth. He bit one of his men on the neck, drank a bit of his blood, and then lunged at the main heroine. Rena, with equal ease, killed the second opponent. The other 2 bandits were very frightened. The main heroine questioned them about the altar stone used by their leader and then took it for herself. Uni, the girl's servant, emerged from under the bed with cat ears on her head. The girls ordered the villains to give up everything they had to atone for their sins. On the next morning, Rena and Uni acted as if nothing had happened, but Lignan couldn't help but ask the girls about what had happened. As it turned out, they were not showing weakness, but were merely observing propriety when they were being kidnapped. In fact, they were displacing justice for themselves and other girls. However, not everything always goes smoothly. At this moment, Lignan feels very foolish. He had tried so hard to protect the girls that even the dagger he had given them had no real meaning. Then the main heroine changed the subject and showed him the altar stone she had received from the criminal. Lignan said he was looking for this object. A century ago, the altar that opened the doors to hell appeared on Earth and completely changed the history of mankind. Lignan learned that the altar was in this city, so he stayed here on his way to the capital. Now the stone belongs to the girl, and Lignan has no intention of taking it away. However, Rena herself gives up the item as a token of gratitude for the kindness shown to them. The boy accepts the gift. Now the young man is planning to go to the imperial palace, but cannot take the girls with him since the group has already been formed. Rena is not upset by this and suggests meeting at the destination. Lignan returned to his nightly squad. His reconnaissance went very well, as the altar was found. Now it is time to continue the journey to the capital. The whole group moves forward on horseback. Lignan remembers the words of the main heroine about him being cute and realizes that he also feels sympathy for this strange girl. She pretends to be weak, but is very strong. He smiles as he thinks about her and imagines how the girl will react to the news that Lignan is a duke in the east. The man's musings are interrupted by one of his squad members who notices the Lord's happy face. Lignan decides to find out if the Marquis has a daughter, whom the main heroine pretends to be. As it turns out, the man's daughter is considered dead. Lignan plans to learn more about this when he meets this unusual girl again. Rena and Uni are also traveling in a carriage and talking about their new acquaintance. They never really figured out who this young man was, but judging by his clothing, he wasn't very wealthy. Nevertheless, the girls can only find out more about him if they meet him again. In the Emperor's palace, the main heroine is certain to meet her father and is planning to give him a chance to ask for forgiveness. In her early childhood and until the age of 6, the main heroine lived on a separate estate. Her mother had to give birth and raise an heir, so she was forced to abandon her daughter. During all this time, the little girl suffered greatly from loneliness. All she could do was dutifully look at portraits of her parents, whom she had never seen. It was only when she turned 6 that she returned home and thought that she would now be very happy. Uni and Rena's carriage approached the palace. The maid even saw it from the window. The huge palace was festively decorated, and happy people in beautiful outfits walked around. The queue at the entrance was huge, and the girls were able to pass only thanks to a special invitation. Otherwise, they would have had to wait in line until late at night. As soon as both girls were in their room, the main heroine put on a beautiful dress and went to meet her father. At the entrance to the Marquis's room, she was met by guards who did not intend to let her in and only handed her a letter with very rude content. Unexpectedly, the butler appeared and still allowed the main heroine to enter. The man pretended not to believe the girl and was sure that she was just pretending to be the Marquis's daughter. Then Rena told the story of how the butler laid a carpet on the stairs right outside her room, as she constantly fell off them as a child. This did not change anything and only angered the man. He offered the girl tea and suggested she leave. In the tea, he added poison, despite the fact that he was very sorry for the young lady. Rena hinted that she knew about the poison, but still drank the tea. After that, she ran to her room to spit everything out in the wash basin. However, her legs still became numb. It was probably a type of neurotoxin, and if the girl had not reacted to it immediately, she would have been paralyzed and died soon after. Rena laughs about it, and the maid does not understand why. Afterwards, the servant questioned the young woman about the meeting and was surprised that the letter passed on by her father seemed touching to her. In it, he wrote that he was deeply mourning the loss of his daughter, which gave the young woman hope that the man regretted his actions. That was why she became a little confused in her thoughts, but it was foolish to assume that the poison would go unnoticed. The young woman finds it particularly amusing how the butler turned pale just as soon as Rena gave him a sidelong glance. Uni, in any case, does not understand why the young woman drank the poison. Even if she knew she would remain alive, she would still have to go through pain. The next morning, the Marquis will surely come to check whether the young woman is dead, and then she will finally be able to meet him in person. Nevertheless, there is a risk that they will send a hired killer next time. Uni worries about this, and even suggests switching places with the main heroine in bed to protect her. At night, Rena cannot sleep because of the heat, most likely caused by the poison she took. The young woman goes out to the balcony and hears music from the banquet. She would have been able to enjoy herself as well if it weren't for her father's betrayal. The young woman jumps off the balcony into the garden. Someone approaches her from behind, and she is greatly frightened, thinking it is the assassin her father sent. The young woman forgot her self-defense weapon in her room, but it was not necessary anyway. Lignan asked her if she managed to meet her father, although he already knew that she was stopped at the very doors. The heroine was once again in just her nightgown, and Lignan draped his jacket over her shoulders. The young man was curious as to why the young woman was so desperate to have this meeting, but first he had to tell her something about himself. He had not revealed his origins to the heroine before, fearing it would repel her. The young woman found this charming. Lignan asked her to come to him if nothing came of her meeting with her father. Then the heroine realized Lignan's status, and they both hoped to meet again during such a nocturnal stroll. In the morning, the Marquis Rubel received a letter from his daughter. She promised to explain why she came and what her future plans were. If her father explained why he had been so cruel to her many years ago, the man would be angry. He did not understand how the young woman could have survived a lethal poison, and it could not have been the fault of the butler, as he was a responsible person and even promised to resolve the matter. At that moment, his chambermaid entered the room and informed him that the young woman had come at the invitation of the Duke of the Southern Lands. This surprised the father of the girl, and then he realized that if she was invited by the Duke, then such disrespect towards her was punishable, as she was not even allowed into the room, and then they even tried to kill her. At that moment, Rena and her maid arrived at Bill Alex Grash's Duke of the Southern Lands palace. He was very surprised that the girl had already managed to visit her father. Although she had just arrived at the palace and had not said anything to him, the one who had invited her, Rena, apologized for not coming to greet the Duke first, but the man was not worried about that. He had called a hired killer, and a woman had arrived. During the war with the undead, who roamed the surrounding area and became aggressive upon hearing any sound, Duke Alex's army was nearly destroyed. He thought he was the only survivor, but then he saw a weak-looking knight who managed to defeat all the undead. This knight was the young heroine, and now the Duke was concerned that she was a woman. The Duke doubts that the knight he invited is who he claims to be, but the heroine did not pretend to be a man. She was wearing armor on the battlefield, which was appropriate for the situation. Alex remembers that the knight never introduced himself as a man, so it happened just as it was meant to. Now the question arises about the relationship between the heroine and the Marquis she visited. The girl tells the truth that he is her father, and the Duke understands that she is in a difficult position. He decides not to ask any further questions about it. The heroine asks for protection from Alex, and he agrees, but only on the condition that it won't bring problems to the south, which has just achieved fragile stability. The girl assures him not to worry. She will handle everything correctly. The Grasa Empire rose in place of the destroyed kingdom, thanks to the first emperor. It was divided into the north, south, west, and east. Each of these lands was ruled by a member of the royal family. In the east, the illegitimate son of the previous duke, Lignan Aderner, who was despised by others because of his birth, was in charge. In the west, Calvus Celestium Grassa, who lost the war and became a cardinal in the capital, was in power. In the south, Bill Alex Gracia, who recently won the war and survived thanks to the heroine, was ruling. In the north, the son of the first duke who died in battle, Iraplinus Grassa, was in power. The four dukes were at odds with each other, and each year the situation became more and more heated. Currently, 3 out of 4 have gathered for an audience, with Lignan being deemed unworthy and thus not invited. The discussion revolves around the alleged use of a woman by the Duke of the South to insult the Marquis of the North. The Duke of the Northern Lands did not appreciate this and hinted that it could lead to war. The former Duke of the West tried to calm the others by diverting the topic to their common enemy, Lignan. All agreed that not inviting him was the right decision, as he is not a member of the imperial family. At that moment, the door opened and Lignan entered, dragging along a man who refused to disclose the location of the gathering. He was furious and showed no particular manners, even putting his feet up on the table, as caution around such traitors was deemed unnecessary. Immediately after this, the dukes left, leaving Lignan alone, as they did not wish to continue the meeting in his presence. In the evening, Lignan returns to his room, relieved that the meeting has ended. He realizes that he had no choice but to call people much older than him rats. He also finds out that the girl he had taken a liking to was invited to the imperial ball by the Duke of the South, someone who despises him. He regrets that the protagonist has turned out to be his enemy. Several hours before the meeting of the dukes, Renee returns to her room and finds an invitation to the imperial ball. It was a cunning test, as a negative opinion would be formed if she did not show up or find a partner. That's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you and see you on the next one.